Is it a little too woo-woo to say that I talk to plants?
Hello, hello. We have Sammy Davies with us today, who is the Director of Sustainability and Brand at EcoSafe Zero Waste.
There's so much we don't know about what's beneath our feet, which blows my mind every day. There's more than what meets the eye. There's a lot of magic there.
I want to go down that pigeonhole more.
There's no arguing against the fact that we need to protect the land.
There is no such thing as coincidence.
When you're sick or feeling an ailment of some kind, what you need the most is growing right outside your doorstep. The Mother Earth is always gifting us what we need. We just need to pay attention to it.
Ultimately, there are two things which will always matter: performance and price.
Compostables are not the silver bullet solution.
So how good is that bag in the end? Okay, you can sell a little more, but you and I both know it's not going to compost.
We don't just supply the bags and the bins, but we also supply the education.
What is your take on the argument between industrial and home compostable?
I still wouldn't encourage anyone to do that because everyone's managing their pile differently.
What does good garbage mean to you?
Anything that we create and design has multi-purpose and use.
Hello, hello. Welcome to the Good Garbage Podcast. My name is Ved Krishna. My primary reason for existence has been to find ways to leave our wonderful planet cleaner. We will be speaking with material innovators, creators, and propagators to learn from them how we can build for scale and towards a regenerative future. Their stories will help us answer the big question: what is good garbage? Hello, hello. We have Sammy Davies with us today, who is the Director of Sustainability and Brand at EcoSafe Zero Waste. So, Sammy, as I welcome you to the podcast, Alex and I were discussing before the podcast, and we came up with this idea that you're actually a forest bather. Is that a good way to describe you?
Well, I am based on this beautiful little island called Salt Spring Island in the Pacific Northwest in Canada. And it's a very common practice for people like us up here to be barefoot on the land. Forest bathing is definitely a good way to describe. Yes, yes.
Awesome. I'm glad we got that right. But let's talk more about like in your journey, in your growing up, you were clearly, apart from picking up frogs and God knows doing what with them, but you were clearly close to nature. So it'll be great to hear your journey and how you feel that impacted you and to become the person you are today.
Yeah, I grew up in a small town north of Toronto, and there was a lot of nature around. There was a pond across the street. I actually was able to catch a goldfish with my bare hands because when they mate and do their thing, lay their eggs, there's like a group of them that like splash on the side of the pond. So anyways, I was that kid just getting my hands dirty outside all night, all day long. And my mom reminds me that I was quite a silent child, and it's surprising because all I like to do now is talk about the things that I love, which soil regeneration is one of those things. So I feel like now I've been able to take all of that fun playfulness that I had outdoors and really equate that to inspiring action. That's basically all I want to do these days. So yeah, I think that explains it.
And you also seem to have spent a lot of time camping and outdoors with your parents. So were your parents really outdoorsy people? And how did you kind of get onto that bandwagon of mainly around camping and being in spots which are very nature oriented?
Yeah, well, my mom hates camping, to be fair, but it was my dad that was bringing me out fishing and really ensuring that we like went on these crazy adventures. And my parents, when we traveled a lot as kids, they'd always go to, like, we went to Venezuela and Cuba and all these places, but we never went to the big resorts. We always went to the small local towns, and I feel like that really gave me a diverse view on what the world is actually like. So yeah, my parents were very much involved and in that way, but there's something about now that I'm just so active in making a change for the better. So yeah, it all kind of spins around into this thing about caring about the land that we're on, because I've seen the land that I play on has turned into subdivisions and has been developed now, right? So it changes your perspective on the future of what the world's going to look like. And so I'm just such an advocate for keeping things wild and free and fun in that way.
And it seems like, again, continuing with your early trajectory because you chose to do environmental studies as your undergrad. And so it was already in you that, this is something that you want to do. It's not a eureka moment that came now, or was there a eureka moment that happened, in this trajectory?
Yeah, well, a little bit because I actually started my BA program in a general BA program. So I didn't know that I was going to fall into environmental studies. I was actually thinking that I was going to be a teacher before that in a concurrent ed program. But long story short, I took a couple environmental studies in first year and the one thing I took from it was there's no arguing against the fact that we need to protect the land. Of course, some people still will say that climate change isn't real or those kinds of things, which is why I like to choose the term climate instability. But yeah, once I took that program many years ago now, it's really been the foundation of everything I do, which it means a lot to me to be in this work.
So my girls and I have three, and
Yeah.
especially the younger two, they love zip lining. And
Oh,
I remember last year we were in Guatemala, and my youngest was just like, okay, she found out that there was this zip lining course, and we just went for like 3 hours. It was just one after the other, and then you would have a lot of ropeways and all sorts of obstacles, and like she loved it. My middle one was like, "Oh my gosh, the younger sister is crazy because it was so hot during the day." But then you have a couple of zip lining jobs. So tell me more about how that happened and what was that like?
yeah, so in between summers during university and even after, because it was really hard to find a green job, if you want to label it that, I ended up in outdoor education and zip lining, which is a lot of fun. So it kept me fit physically, but the zip lining, it was really about place and time. There was a zip line park close to my cottage, so I was able to work there in the summers. And then I was spending a lot of time in Costa Rica. I became close with some families there. And so the zip lining is really cool because it takes you to a whole new level of earth. The treetops is a whole different landscape and ecosystem. So it was really fun when I was a zip line guide because I was doing it in an area where my ancestors are from. So I can trace back to the 1700s of when my family landed in the Carolinian forests of southern Ontario. And so I used to point out, like, Long Point is where my great 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 grandfather was the first lighthouse keeper. And, I could really not only tune into the fact that the Carolinian forest is the most diverse ecosystem in Canada, but also I have family ties there and could tell all those kinds of stories. So yeah, it really dials back to the regenerative storytelling. And my main mission when I came out of school at first was the more people I get outside having fun outside, the more they'll care about it and want to protect it. So that was my original mission back in the day.
So one of my dear friends, and I'm sure you know them, the people at Canopy,
Yeah.
Valerie and Nicole, and they were on the show. And then, of course, we got to talk about Susan Simard and all the work that she did with, and the
Oh,
book. I don't know if you've read Overstory and
so good.
like the stunning work around the secret lives of trees. And that's really something that like exactly what you're saying, the whole ecosystem in canopies is so different and we don't understand it. And these are, of course, a bunch of tree huggers who decided to find alternates. But it's fascinating to see the kind of work and the space they come from, the purity of their intent is really remarkable. So was it also impacting you and building you as you were seeing that ecosystem go by and as you're ziplining?
Yeah, especially when I had a chance to do it in the cloud forest of Costa Rica because Monteverde, the cloud forest is such a unique ecosystem. I think 5 to 8% of the world's biodiversity resides there, which is a lot. And so I think seeing the partnerships between like the epiphyte plants, which are plants that grow off of other plants, and just seeing those symbiotic relationships and how everything's interconnected and some of the most amazing, beautiful birds that you've ever seen live there, and people flock from all over the world to see it. It's really, really, really profound. And the more I learned about biodiversity and how more like the land is more resilient with the more diversity there is. So that all of that tied together. And with Suzanne Simard's work, she's incredible. And she's the one that discovered the mother tree and how the mother tree feeds and communicates all of the saplings and the younger trees. And if you haven't seen Fantastic Fungi yet, that's also a great documentary which talks about mushrooms and how the mushrooms are actually the network underneath the ground that's making all these connections and nutrients. They're like feeding each other, and there's so much we don't know about what's beneath our feet, which blows my mind every day, which is really what got me tapped into soil and to compost. So it all works together. And yeah, there's so much power in that, and it just makes me feel so much healthier when I know that what's beneath me is like interconnected, and there's more than what meets the eye. There's a lot of magic there.
And there's so much unknown. So that's the
Yeah.
other craziness, right? They say in
Mhm.
one scoop of soil, there is so many organisms that we don't know at all about, which
Yeah.
is so amazing. And of course, similar to you, I get to spend at least part of my time in the Pacific Northwest. So I landed on Saturday, and as soon as I landed, and I was telling you that I'm just back, and I called up or I messaged this friend of mine, okay, dude, end of the season, when are we going mushroom foraging? And we were
Oh,
both like, okay, let's get out. And I think Saturday afternoon itself, and he was like, "You are crazy. You're off the plane and into the forest." I was like, "Totally, the Matsutakes are going to be here now. You
wow.
can't, they're
Now's
not
the
going to
time.
wait for us." So, but we didn't get any Matsutakes. Sadly, but we got a lot of yellow chanterelles and winter chanterelles and some
Nice.
hedgehogs, and it was amazing. And of course, this guy who's a friend, and we go whenever we go together, I learn so much because again, he is someone who really knows, and he's so excited, exactly as you were kind of getting animated when you were
Yeah.
speaking about it. Wait, this happens now, and this is only at this point of the year. It's just so much fun to go out there and explore. So I don't know if you do any mushroom foraging, but it's so much fun.
Yeah, I don't do it as often as I should, being on the West Coast, but when I was living back in Ontario, I stumbled upon this massive chicken of the woods. It was huge, and it was like, glowing in the sunlight, and was beautiful. And me and my friends stared at it for like an hour, just wondering what to do next. And we ended up foraging some of it and making like chicken strips out of it. It was so good. It was so good. So foraging is really, I'm a herbalist, so I practice herbalism, growing medicinal plants, and that has been so crucial to my life. Honestly, connecting with the land in that way, it's like I can feel it's like a knowing that must have happened centuries before me. With the world that we're in right now, and how there's like a meta crisis going on, we need to find these things that ground us in with the land to really understand ourselves better, and the simplicity of life. It's there's so much joy there. And it's really interesting talking about foraging too, because it's like free food that's been grown on the land, and the earth is just offering us so much gifts. So yeah, I'm really grateful to know all these things. And we're, being in the Pacific Northwest, we're one of the luckiest to experience older growth trees and the mushrooms too. So yeah, there's a lot to be grateful for out here.
I want to go down that pigeonhole more. Tell me more
Yeah.
about your life as a herbalist. What does that
Oh,
mean? What do you do? What shape does it take for you?
yeah, I had a friend that when I was studying environmental studies, she was studying it as well at a different university down the street, and she was an outdoor educator. And I was always a little, not jealous, but just envious of how much knowledge she had when we'd go on these camping trips, and she'd be pointing out all these different things. Oh, that's yarrow. If you get a cut, you can put some of that on and it'll stop the bleeding. And it's just like really practical things that if there was ever an apocalypse, which was really my driving force, I'm like, okay, if the world was to shut down tomorrow, which it kind of did a couple of years ago, I want to know some survival skills. So that's what really brought me towards wanting to understand what's growing around me. And a lot of herbalists will say, like, oftentimes when you're sick or feeling an ailment of some kind, what you need the most is growing right outside your doorstep. It's really interesting. So I take a really careful approach with herbalism. I really want to honor the indigenous wisdom that's there, and not over forage and over harvest and that sort of thing. But something that I've really connected to is like nettles. Nettles grow abundantly here, and it's such a wonderful tea that's full of iron and all these minerals that we're often lacking. So yeah, again, it's just that reciprocal nature that's around us. The Mother Earth is always gifting us what we need. We just need to pay attention to it.
So I've got some really amazing education in the last couple of years, and we were speaking briefly about Guatemala, where we are setting up another kind of factory. And of course, similar to you, I want to kind of dive deeper into the indigenous wisdom. And it was very interesting when I went there that there was a divide. There were the urban Guatemalans who had nothing to do with the Mayan Guatemalans. And thankfully, through kind of friends of friends, I found this amazing, very, very dear friend of mine now who's an anthropologist, and she was trying to do kind of build a bridge between the traditional knowledge and the Western knowledge because she did a PhD in anthropology in Switzerland, was deeply impacted by the Mayan knowledge, and thankfully, I managed to go with her for exactly what you were talking about, where she would try and find a certain kind of plant, but it wasn't the actual plant, but the process of finding the plant that was
Mm.
fascinating for me. Like even before entering a forest, she would always take permission. And then the way the plant was taken out very delicately, and she would talk to the plant first and then really engage. And I asked her once, Monica, what happens if the forest doesn't give you permission? She says, I don't go then. It has happened. It's not the time is not right. Or if the plant says, I'm not happy to go with you, she said, I will try very hard to convince the plant. Then, like I may, and I'll take care of it. And then I was being her driver, and she would keep talking to the plant all along. Don't worry about it. I know you're feeling jarred, but I'm going to take care of you. And then she would send me pictures from time to time, which was
Oh.
fascinating. And you're right. Also, a lot of work on essential oils, which was
Mm.
also very interesting for me to get that window open to me. And of course, in her own experience, the reason why she got so engrossed in this system was because she actually had cancer, and the
Wow.
Mayans cured her. So her own father was an oncologist. She
Wow.
didn't go the Western route and
Wow.
got cured of her cancer. And that's what really took her fancy that she needs to bring this knowledge onto the Western
Wow.
world. So it's been remarkable to see all the knowledge that the indigenous systems hold. And then, of course, beyond that, I've gone on various rabbit holes trying to explore. So I don't know if you want to talk more about your journeys with nature and healing along with
Yeah,
it.
I love that you brought that up because I was gonna say, is it a little too woo-woo to say that I talk to plants? But
Oh, no, not at all.
I
Go for it.
I actually think that this is something special to talk about, especially in the business world. I'm in an MBA right now in sustainable innovation at the University of Victoria, and one of my professors, Gia, she's teaching us sustainable supply chains and operations. And the first thing she did was brought up the book Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. And I think traditional business programs, they often center the economy around everything, right? But it's really actually the environment. And so my practice with herbalism has been very much the same. Take a couple minutes focusing on the plant. And even when we make tinctures and different types of medicinal preparations, when we take them, we take a little and sit with it and really allow it to reinvigorate our body system. And oftentimes, when you're in a silent group of people and you're all taking the same thing, we share afterwards. And often people feel the same, either same visuals, or maybe their heart opened or their throat felt tickled or something like that. And so these specific plants have specific actions that hit specific body systems. And so it's really interesting when you look at different plants. Like, there's this practice called the doctrine of signatures. And so you can look at certain plants and just take a minute and think, what does that look like? And oftentimes some will look like, the cells of our skin, or like the shape of our heart, or the shape of our lungs. And then oftentimes that plant interacts with that part of our body. So there's actually one plant out here called ocean spray. And whenever I'm on a hike with people, I say, when it's in its dry season, not when it's in its flower season, but I ask people, I'm like, what does that look like to you? And sometimes they'll get the answer that I'm looking for, and it's diarrhea. And I'm like, well, there you go. That plant actually does alleviate diarrhea. So it's just, yeah, they're speaking to us, and I believe it. I think it's makes me crazy sounding at first, but the more you lean in, the plants are really cool because they're not animals walking around. You don't get to meet each other halfway. The plant is just set in one spot. So when you see a plant, whenever you're walking, if it really catches your eye, just sit with it for like 10-30 minutes and see what comes up, because it's a different relationship for everyone, and I think it's a beautiful journey that is really grounding, like I was saying earlier.
Yeah, I did a partial biomimicry program. I couldn't finish it,
Cool.
and I blame it on COVID, but
Yeah.
it's me to blame, not the COVID. But but yeah, a lot of the program was exactly what you're saying.
Wow.
Sit in observation and watch what the plant teaches you. Also things like walnuts and kidney beans, and all the
Yeah.
things that you can think of, right? It's so clear what they are supposed to work with, which is interesting. But something you said was again fascinating. The heritage I come from is more Ayurveda and the
Mhm.
Indian systems, but they talk about each person being unique,
Mm.
and it's of course the balance of the five elements, but no medicine is the same for everybody.
Right.
So it depends on, they call it dosha, which is your leaning of your overall spirit, not just your body. And then it talks about how each medicine will work differently for you. So in a typical Ayurvedic system, you never go and tell your symptom or what you're feeling. The doctor observes 18 different things, and those are things like your walk, your hair, your skin, eyes. And of course, after that, you just hold your hand out and they'll take your pulse and they will tell you what is wrong with you. And Sammy, it's so spooky at times. Like the first time, my wife is American, and the first time I took her to this old Ved, we call it, the doctor, and and this is a little narrow corridor with all the patients. There is no word in Hindi for privacy, so everything is, it's fair game. There is no such thing as your space and my space. So
Yeah.
everybody's sitting, and finally she goes up and she shows her wrist. He looks at her and he says, "Oh, your period got irregular about 6 months back, but don't worry about it. It'll be fine in a year." And she was just like, how the heck does he know? But it was that kind of knowledge, right? Just by the
Wow.
whole system, that he could tell when it went irregular and when it will get okay. It's not just the past, but the future as well,
Yeah.
what she's going through in terms of the body, which is
Yeah.
so interesting,
Yeah.
how that happens. And the other funny one that I've been on the last 2 days is that there is a company called doTERRA. Do you know it? It's an
Yeah.
essential
Yeah.
oil. Yeah.
Yeah.
So doTERRA, which is more like what do you call it? The one-to-one kind of marketing company. But
Mhm.
then this friend of mine got me onto these beads. And I'm like, how do I get these beads? But then finally I found them on Amazon and I was like, okay, I need them for the essential oils now. It's
Ah.
so interesting, this whole world of not being able to, and by interesting, I mean it's all around us, like you said. But so few of us are connecting and understanding and gaining that knowledge, which is probably getting lost in some ways, right?
Lost and then totally found, and it's great that I love that you brought up Ayurveda, because that's something that inspires me to get into a lot more. During COVID, I was very stressed, eating the wrong foods, and I was totally breaking out with cystic acne, and the doctors couldn't do anything. Nobody, the dermatologist, nothing helped except a holistic nutritionist. So it took her to tell me what to eat, and that really cleared my skin. And then I realized the power of food and the power of herbs and how it all goes together. I was very pitta in Ayurvedic terms at the time. So yeah, and I didn't realize that the yoga of herbs, which is Ayurveda, goes with yoga. Like it goes hand in hand, which so many people know the movement of yoga, but they don't think about the plants of yoga. So there's so much more there to discover that I'm excited to learn about. But yeah, I can relate to everything you're saying. And there's so much to learn and it's very overwhelming. But I would just encourage anyone to start with like 1 to 5 plants that speak to you and get to know them really well. There's no rush in knowing all the plants and everything they do. Like you really only need to know a couple plants, and one thing that will help a lot of people these right now in these times is adaptogens. So they really help you adapt to stress. And holy basil, tulsi, which comes from India, which is very sacred plant to Indians over there. That is one of my favorite teas, and it's just so rejuvenating. It hits all the five elements. That's a great hot tip for anyone listening if you want to try something that's not caffeinated and can really, hit all the right spots and help you feel replenished for these times. Yeah, that's my hot tip.
This is becoming more of my spiel than yours, but I have to tell you this little story on holy
Yeah.
basil. So, so there was this couple, Israeli American, who basically found their guru in India, of course, as many do, and then this lady was a heiress to Seagram's, and then she got into a lot of money, but she went to the guru and said, "Well, I can't have this money because it's ill-gotten wealth. So why don't you take it and do something good with it?" And he's like, I'm a monk. I can't really do much with money. So she said, okay, what should I do with it? So he tells her that there is this area where the land is very alkaline, the soil is very alkaline, and the farmers are committing suicide because they don't have enough income. So why don't you go there and use your resources to enable them to, find something to do? And her husband and her, they go off there and finally find that there is a kind of holy basil which is called black basil, and
Ooh,
that grows well on the alkaline soil. And somebody tells them it's basil, people will consume it in India. So they have that grown and it grows well, and the
wow.
commitment to the farmers is that we'll buy it back. So they do, but they get stuck with 8 tons of basil. Imagine
Wow.
that, the lightweight basil.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, what are we going to do now? And of course, lose a ton of money. But that's how, I don't know if you know the brand, but that's how Organic India got born.
Oh,
So I don't know if you've
wow.
seen their teas, but they are mostly basil based. And then these two,
Amazing.
one other herbal doctor came along and he said, "Oh, why don't you make a tea out of it?" And now
Wow.
it's a huge brand in India. It's called
Wow.
Organic India, and they do a bunch of stuff, but that's how
Wow.
it got born. So that's so
Wow.
interesting that, you get stuck with something and that leads you to another direction in your life.
Maybe before they were just going to cut it down and throw it away. That's the definition, I guess. You're going to ask me what I think about good garbage. That to me is good garbage, I guess. Like, in a sense, like they're making sure that it's not going to waste and yeah, making sure there's multi-purpose for different things like that. That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. It's so fascinating. I have been before and oh my gosh, it blows my mind what grows there and the food and everything. So it's what a magical place.
I hope to have you back there to show you
Yeah,
India with different eyes now.
very
So,
cool.
uh, I'm going to pivot.
Yeah.
Uh, from all the beautiful world of herbs, how does XE happen? Because that's a currency converter and I use it all the time. And then I was like, oh, somebody worked there. So what was that all about?
I love that. It's such a great start to my career working at XE, honestly. I had an in there. I had a really good friend that lived across the street. She was like a big sister to me. And she gave me my first cleaning job, my first job ever in high school. So I was cleaning XE, the office, which was founded by two very smart, clever guys in Newmarket, Ontario. So it is a Canadian born company. And so I was cleaning the office there, which at the time was not a big deal. I would always wait till last minute, go on Sunday night, eat their Friday lunch leftovers because they had that cool culture where they had lunch for the whole company on Fridays and things like that. But long story short, when I went to university and graduated and moved back in with my parents, so I was back in the local area again, and I was blogging about picking up litter around my neighborhood. So I was noticing on my running route while I was searching, job hunting, I was seeing and found over 100 bags of kitty litter along my running route. So I started these community litter cleanups. And then because I was jobless and bored and really wanted to make a difference, I was blogging about this. So I called myself a litter loaner. My blog's still alive if anyone wants to check that out. But essentially what they needed at the time. They just were acquired by Euronet at the time, and they were transforming their business. They went from being 60 employees to a couple hundred around the world, and they needed someone to do digital marketing. And so because they knew me and liked me, they called me up and they're like, hey, we need a digital marketer. You blog, start working with us. And I was like, can I know nothing about websites, but anyways, I worked there for 3.5 years, picked it up real quick and loved every second of it. That's where I really learned that digital skills were going to be so complementary to all of my environmental knowledge. So yeah, so I was managing their social media and their email marketing campaigns and a range of things, their ad campaigns. And yeah, it was a really wild time and a really pivotal time for me because I was then more, aware of the digital world and how websites work, which is critical for today's work and what I do. So that's the short, long story sort of the fintech company XE. I do love that place and cherish the founders a lot. They gave a lot of us a good leg up in our careers. So
How did it make money?
advertising. There
Okay.
was millions of unique users around the world using this currency converter because Google had not launched their currency calculator yet. And so, yeah, it was advertising, which is pretty wild. Now they have international money transfers and different services going on, but I still would say I would trust their currency rates over Google because they use a currency data API that basically has over 100 different sources of information around the world, and that's how they jumble up the calculation for foreign exchange. So I would still trust it over Google or any other currency converter for sure.
I actually use it all the time, and I've used
Great.
it because we deal in so many kind of
Yeah,
currencies. Yeah, like I've been using it for at least 10, 15 years. I
I
don't know
love
how long
that.
it's been there, but XE has been the go-to, and I haven't
Yeah,
figured Google out yet. Yeah,
yeah,
now I think even the Apple calculator does it,
yeah.
it has been XE has been the go-to place.
Yeah, and what I loved about their culture is they allowed me to start a green team. So I was feeling like I was lacking the skills that I really wanted to have an impact in the world at the time. So I started a green team. We did litter cleanups and things like that. But what I loved about working there is that they had a composting program. So who's now my good friend Jocelyn, she started Waste Not Farms, and at the time she was picking up our food scraps from the office, bringing it back to her worm farm, and she sells regenerative potting soil and worm castings, and it's great for your home house plants. So she was the first person that really introduced me to the magic of composting. So I'm really grateful for that time, and her and I have been great friends since, and have held little festivals on her land to show people the magic of worm poo and tiny home building and all this stuff. So back when I was in Ontario, we were doing a lot of those kinds of events, which was a lot of fun. So yeah.
That's wonderful. And before we jump into EcoSafe, so two more points of your journey. One is OneLoop.app, which is
Mm,
something you began, I believe, and then the other is the Open Ocean Robotics. Tell me a
mm.
little more about those two before we dive into the meat and potatoes, as they would say.
Yeah. Yeah. After XC, I was working in the cannabis industry downtown Toronto and not enjoying it at all. It was very corporate and extreme, and I could tell I wasn't going to be there long. So I started this project called One Loop, which was basically what I wanted to show was I participated in Plastic Free July when I lived in Toronto, and I wasn't in Toronto for very long. Long story short, I would have starved every day if I didn't bring my own lunch because it was next to impossible to find food that wasn't touching plastic. And that shocked me. So I wanted to create an alternative to Google because right now, how I search for restaurants is I look on Google Maps and I kind of look around, find the top rated place and go, right? But at the time, I was like, what if there was an easier way to find for conscious consumers places they want to eat and go to? And so for 2 years, me and my friend who's a design thinking strategist, Roxy, and Sal, who's a software engineer, we were thinking around how we can create this app that's not only like Google, where it's 1 to 5 stars rating and I didn't want it to be a thing where it's like, oh, you sell plastic straws, you suck, no one should go here. It's not like that. What we wanted was like a two-way marketplace so that the restaurants who get the feedback that say they're not composting well, that then One Loop could feed them information on which signage do you need and what compostable liners do you need, and just kind of give like a holistic marketplace on helping businesses become more conscious and in a way that suits their customization, right? But then COVID happened, restaurants shut down. I started my job at EcoSafe, and it kind of has just been pushed on the wayside. But what's really exciting that I've discovered lately is recently is there's this institute called the Shorefast Institute. And so they have this measurement called the economic nutrition label. Definitely recommend checking it out. And instead of just convincing businesses to have a sustainable procurement strategy, it's actually increasing place-based economies. So long story short, Shorefast, it's a project that I'll be working on this year, and it's kind of related to One Loop, which is the only reason I kind of say that One Loop was a project I worked on, because I thought about it for 2 years and put heavy design thinking skills into it. But there's a need for local economies to be boosted, and we have to show it in a way that's just not being done right now. And so the economic nutrition label is like one of the ways that I'm most excited, because they've shown how a business can reflect how they support their local economies by having this nutrition label, which we're all familiar with how a nutrition label works on for food. But what if it showed the health of an economy based on how a business is, basing their procurement strategies and supporting the local economy? So I don't know if that all makes sense, but just trying to innovate with the way we can support one another in these local economies, because especially right now being in Canada, we're changing a lot of rules here with the tariffs going on with the US and whatnot. So it's just, yeah, there's ways we could be supporting our local economy and showing it too and celebrating it. So that was one loop. And then I think the other question you had was open ocean robotics. So I moved from Toronto to the West Coast because I was like, you know what? I'm not finding a job that's related to doing good things in the world. I bet you there's something on the West Coast, because it's just more embedded in the culture out here. And so Open Ocean Robotics, I met Julie Angus, the CEO. And so they build solar powered drones that float on the ocean. And they're these USVs that can be out at 6 months at a time on the ocean, collecting any data that you could imagine. So they're really great for marine mammal monitoring. So monitoring the orcas that are out there who are having troubles, to, monitoring marine protected areas, which there's a lot of illegal fishing going on. So it was really cool. They were a startup at the time. They didn't have any social media happening. And I was like, hey, I'm looking for a job. Can I freelance for you? And they said yes. But what was great was when I was volunteering for them at a trade show, that's when I met my boss at EcoSafe. And that's how I got introduced to that. And I'm so thankful for all of that along the way, because it sounded easy, but it was actually really a hard time for me. And April 1st, 2020 is when I started at EcoSafe, and the world shut down. So if I hadn't had all of that happen, I would have had to move back in with my parents back in Ontario and do it all again, So I always just try to say and mentor people, just trust the journey and really get involved in a network, because that's how it all happens. It's the road's not clear, and just putting yourself out there can get you there.
It's the power of synchronicity. There is no such
Yes.
thing. One of my coaches says that, there is no such thing as coincidence. You are where you are, and you are doing what you're doing because of the universe's kind of synchronicity,
Mhm.
and that is happening around you. All the things that are
Totally.
enabling you on your journey, so
Yes.
to say. But it's interesting when you were talking about the one loop, I think it makes a lot of sense. Vegans like myself, we use Happy Cow. I don't know if you know
Mhm.
that app. That's a
Yeah,
very
I studied
interesting
that a
one.
lot.
And so that's interesting. But what you're talking about is actually makes even more sense. Like just the idea that did it touch plastic or not, because that has an impact. How's the restaurant doing holistically? And that would also obviously encourage a lot of restaurants to adapt
Yes.
more towards these ideas of really thinking, how you kind of do things. In fact, I don't know if you've been to or heard of Auroville, which is like this utopian land in the south of India, which started as like a barter economy, and then has branched out a little, but it's still just full of creative souls
Mhm.
exploring their journey. And one of their areas was started with this Israeli couple again, who started something called Sadhna Forest,
Mhm.
which is again really stretching yourself to think how to live closer to the planet. And it's super interesting because obviously everything has to be a part of it. The food and the way you live, the way you use things, the way you consume, the way you use electricity, etc., etc., the way you build, the way you talk to each other, even
Yeah.
that. So it's all part of that. And I spent a few days there this last month. And again, like places that like that who encourage us to dig a little deeper. And then actually two of our very, very dynamic young women who are leading our ecology actually are there right now. I said, just go there for 2 weeks. That's your training. Just learn, imbibe, and then, everything else becomes easier. What will our water consumption be and what will our energy be when you yourself fundamentally believe in the idea of giving more than you take. So like I'm sure even one loop will kind of take its own form over time.
Yeah, well, transparency is key. And what I wanted to show instead of 1 to 5 star ratings, I wanted to show where are they in the loop, and it can just show that a business is on the journey of becoming sustainable or regenerative, whatever you want to call it, because it's a journey, and that's very much what I touch on with compostables too. Compostables are not the silver bullet solution, but they are part of the transition to zero waste, and it's crucial. Like, to change everyone's behavior at once, it's just not going to happen. So it's a journey, and so many people are annoyed with the fact that a lot of people say that, but it is like, we can't switch it all and change it overnight, right? So yeah, and I just want to honor people who are beginning the journey, because not everyone has the education that I have, and so it's going to take time to get people to jump on board and be excited to make a change, especially when there's so much misinformation about recycling rates being low and not actually being true and all these things. It's yeah, I always try to get people to narrow it down to a local focus, because it's really about local context. It's what's happening here is not what's happening where you are, and yeah, it's important to remember that, because we can see whatever we see on media and it'll completely change our mind, but we have to remember it's our community around us that we need to tap into to understand what's going on around us. So I would love to visit that place in India. I have heard of it. So you'll have to send me some
I'll
pictures.
give you more temptation to come back.
Great, great.
There's more things to be done. I'm sure there's this famous book called Seven Habits by Stephen Covey, came way back. But one part of it I always remember and I use is exactly what you were saying, that our lives are in kind of two circles. There's a circle of concern, and we have so many, right? Like it
Mm,
could be malnutrition and gender equality and ecology and what have you. But then exactly what you're saying, we within that we also have a circle of influence, and
mm,
what you do there locally is what matters in the end, because you
yeah.
can keep being concerned and just fret that why aren't people doing this, but what are we doing ourselves? What is that one step we are taking
Right.
is of course what is going to matter in the
Yeah.
end. We would like to take a minute to thank our sponsors. Good Garbage is sponsored by Paka, a family of brands that produces compostable packaging and works to implement regenerative solutions. Paka's new project is to bring compostable food serviceware and food carry products to the North American marketplace. Learn more at paka.com. Now back to the conversation. So I think that takes us well to, you know, EcoSafe. And you told us a little bit about how it started, but maybe take a step back and talk a little more about the diaper journey from the founders and how EcoSafe happened on its own. And then let's dive into what it does.
Yeah. So EcoSafe Zero Waste is a company based just south of Vancouver in British Columbia, and it was founded by three men who were way ahead of their time, honestly, in 1998, I believe. And so they were tapped into certain technologies at the time. Oxo-degradable was the big thing back then, right? And fair enough, like, that was it's important to know that a lot of companies have started in these places that actually weren't that great, but it was the best that they had at the time. And so they were dealing with oxo-degradable plastic bags at the time, and then they created a compostable diaper, which still does not exist today, which says how hard it is. I don't think it is. Like, there's reusable diapers. I don't think there's an actual hundred. Maybe there is, actually. I
There
could be
is, there
wrong.
is. There is
Yeah.
both sanitary pads and diapers, but like everything else, it obviously costs more and it's less
Yeah.
available. So not a lot of people are using it. But
Yeah.
at least I know in India there are many, many companies who do that,
Right.
compostables.
Okay. So yeah, so EcoSafe started with biodegradable diapers at the time and oxo-degradable plastics, and it didn't take them long to realize that oxo-degradable was not the way to go. And so over time, they reiterated, worked with our resin suppliers, and now we use the strongest resins out there and manufacture certified compostable film products. So primarily, we deal with large liners and bags, and we work with a lot of haulers. So a lot of our hauler friends in our own backyard in British Columbia really enjoyed our product because it was the right fit for all of the types of bins that were out there. We really took the time to understand what their issues were and their what size bins they were using. So we have a bag and liner for every bin that exists. And so, yeah, I started 5 years ago, and all of the founders are retired now, but I did get to meet them when I first started. And they were just, there was a lot of green hushing going on. Do you know what green hushing means? Yeah.
Yep. But you
Yeah.
can explain, go ahead.
Yeah, so when I started at EcoSafe, I was actually quite concerned that I was doing the wrong thing because there were so many people out there saying that compostables don't actually compost. And I believed my team, but I really had to do my due diligence as I was hired as the learning and development specialist at the time. So I was doing all of our distributor training, and I wanted to ensure that, what we were saying was true. And so I kind of freaked out for the first year and really tried to access people that I could trust being in the science world. And that's when I bumped into Love Essie, who I know you've had on the podcast before, and Emily McGill as well. She worked for BSI Bio and the compostable field testing research. And so when I met those two, and they really talked me into the science behind it, because as much as I'm a communicator and can understand the science, I am not a science person. I don't live in that world, and I can trust myself to understand it, but I really wanted to get to the bottom of it. And so, yeah, so then I just started to discover, okay, certified compostables are truly compostable. I understand this now, but how can we communicate it, and what else does the system need to work really well? And so that's where EcoSafe really shines, is because we provide the signage and the bins, and even the policy information. A lot of our end users don't understand what certified compostable even means. They don't understand what is compostable and what's not. So, we do a lot of consulting in that way, even where we don't just supply the bags and the bins, but we also supply the education, which is needed all across the system, at all levels, all the time. Every time I go to a conference, everyone's saying that education is like super key. And so we're always trying to provide that extra value and assistance when we work with cities and haulers and all of our end users. So yeah, it's been quite a ride because, as you probably know, there's SB 54 happening in California, and I have a lens of North America, so I'm not just focused in the States. I'm also in Canada, where we just had a single use plastics ban federally, and so that actually, unfortunately ended up banning our compostable checkout bags, which is a shame because it's a great solution in the areas where there is commercial compost facilities, and the grocery stores were using the compostable checkout bags at the checkout, right? And so now we're using these supposedly reusable 100-time bags. That's the measurement that they qualify as a compliant bag for grocery stores to use, but their end of life doesn't exist, that you can't recycle them, and you can't compost them. So it's just like, dang, I do a lot of policy work, and I try to advocate before those policies and bans come through. But yeah, for a small company, we're only like 16 people. So I try to cover a lot of ground in it. And it's a lot of fun, and I love it.
No, I have heard of your vociferousness in conferences, so we will talk a little more about the policy side as well. But
Yeah.
I'm fascinated with this idea that you kind of inferred to very lightly that you basically make everything for every size of bin or trash can. So do you know how this business model evolved? Because from my perspective, I think for a business to have a very clear focus is so important. And
Mhm.
many of us try to dabble in too many things. But the
Oh,
specialization that we are going to be a trash can liner, and it could be a dog poop bag, and it could be a full large trash bag, and everything in between. How did that evolve, and how did that focus come to be? It'll be great to hear your perspective on that.
I'm giggling because we still try to do it all. And I know what you mean when you say that. And I think it was about timing, honestly, for EcoSafe. They were pioneers with compostable liners at the time, and they built really solid relationships with our manufacturing partners. One of them being in the States, we work with a minority owned manufacturer in an indigenous area with the Lake Sisteron Wahpeton people. And so it's just, there's been a lot of solid relationships that I'm really grateful our founders have created. And we were also the 2010 official Olympic compostable bag for the Olympics in Vancouver. So again, I think it always comes down to relationships, and I think that's just part of it, because we also have tried to cover a lot of ground. When you think about food waste, which I hate using that term, I'd rather just say food scraps because food isn't waste. But when you think about where food waste is generated, it's anywhere food is sold, processed, or eaten, and that's everywhere. So if you think about that target market, it's everyone. And so, we try to cover a lot of ground in that way. And I think honestly, we still today, we have our vertical markets, and we have different ways of approaching them. But I think for the way they started, it was about relationships, finding the best business model at the time, which was working with haulers and the waste generators, making their job easier.
And you said for manufacturing, you said partners. Do you do any manufacturing directly yourself, or is it's all through partnerships?
It's all through partnerships, and so we're really proud to have a manufacturer in Canada, a manufacturer in the States. We have some overseas, but most of our partnerships are based in North America, which has been really helpful during these times, and it makes us really competitive in that way too, because especially just me being Canadian and knowing what Canadians are saying, they want to buy locally. So it feels really great to be able to serve our clients both in the States and Canada with that. So there's lower fees on travel times and shipping and all that kind of stuff. So it's really a feel good story. And I've I've dabbled in the B Corp assessment. We aren't B Corp certified. We easily could be if I could just finish the assessment and give it more time. But a big part of that is what's going on in the supply chain, making sure that all of your manufacturers and are, fair trade certified and all those kinds of things. So it's been actually fun to be able to look at our company holistically and see where we can improve and where they've done so famously well. And like going back to green hushing, a lot of the good stuff that we've done has not been shared. And that's just out of respect that the founders had for their partners. They didn't want to shout it at the rooftops. They just wanted to do a good job. So
So, how much sway have you had in terms of the design, in terms of the materials used, etc., etc.? Because I presume there would be a lot of input there or co-creation. How does that
yeah.
take place? Because obviously the material, the compound, the structure, the size would differ, and the gauge or the thickness would differ. And of course, if you want to do a certain amount of printing, that would differ. So, how much sway do you have in that respect?
Yeah, because I would say I'm more of an environmental person than a business person. I'm always that advocate for the earth. And I roll my eyes because I'm sure other people are going to roll their eyes too. But, in our communication, I really care about telling the story correctly and transparently and truthfully. And so that's really where I've had a lot of sway, because I do spend a lot of time on these policy calls and trying to understand, who are the thought leaders in labeling guidelines, for example, and how can we make it easier for consumers, but like what makes it difficult for us as manufacturers on our end to label things properly, because it takes investment to get the printer plates changed and all that kind of stuff, right? So I feel really blessed and lucky that my leadership team is they share the same values. We really truly just want to do good, and so we always follow the strictest standards. So for compostable bags, the strictest labeling standards right now are coming out of Washington State, which ensures that everything's either green or blue tinted and has the green compostable labeling and all that kind of stuff. So I do have leeway. And I think because I have that environmental background, I can really share what I know about sustainability. And even through the MBA program I'm in right now, we talk a lot about ESG and what that means. And so it's great because I don't actually have to fight my team at all. They are already in line. I just make sure that it's in congruency, in tandem with where the industry is going, which is why I really like staying tapped into what the BPI is up to and what CMA is up to, because they're both doing a lot of systems work and systems change as well. And we're aware the compost industry is such a beautiful industry to work in because I get to meet the composters and hear their troubles. And I don't want composters to become the next landfill. So I would never allow my team to create something that would do that. We would never come out with a compostable chair, for example, because we can use other materials for that. Whereas anything that's food contact and related, that's what needs to be compostable right now, because the goal is to keep food out of landfill to reduce methane emissions, right? So yeah, like I said, my team, I have the allowance to help design, but luckily my team, they're very educated as well and understand like what our ethos is, which is to keep food out of landfill.
So when I look at a compostable bag, many times, say if I'm traveling in an airline, when the airline's staff, the stewards are taking your garbage in, a lot of that is compostable now. But again, it's about the other side, the greenwashing of it, where I see the things that they are putting inside are not going to compost. A lot of them are boxes or snack bags, etc., even multi-layered structures. Similarly, when somebody bans a polymer substrate, a petroleum polymer substrate for grocery, and you replace it with a compostable bag, again, when you look inside, that bag still has so much, say, flexible packaging. So how good is that bag in the end? Okay, you can sell a little more, but you and I both know it's not going to compost, nor is somebody going to take everything out of it and then send that back for composting. So how do you tackle that challenge? How do you make sure that, oh, whatever is inside that bag is also compostable? Do you have any sway there? And how
Mhm.
does your kind of mind work when you look at situations like that?
Yeah, it's it's so I'm just laughing because we've tried to work with there's like a national zero waste airport association in I don't know if it's a Canadian association or North American, I forget, but we've chatted with them before to talk about how we can ensure that everything they're source separating actually is compostable and can be composted. But airlines are really unique and interesting because we don't know where that aircraft is going to land. And based on where they're landing, do we know if they actually have a commercial composter nearby? And so it could be, the greenwashing. It's unfortunate that's where I'm hoping my training and where more education can help the custodial level understand why it's important to source separate. They're really the earth workers out there making it happen, because yeah, it's really, we always say you want to start where you want to finish. So it's really about ensuring that only food, we say food scraps only in situations like that when there's a lot of contamination going in the green liner or in the green bin. It's really hard though, Vade. It's really hard to get everyone on board with that. Um, I don't encourage using our compostable liners as trash bags because, again, it still ends up in landfill, and like food, it will emit methane emissions. So yeah, what we're hoping and aiming for is that the green liner will be the indicator that this is only for compostables. It's a matter now of ensuring that everything they're using with on the aircraft, that it all is certified compostable. We helped the LA Memorial Coliseum a couple years ago become zero waste, and we had to partner up with other product companies like Eco Products and other zero waste companies to ensure that not only are our green liners being used for the compost bins, but also all the other food stands are using compostable food serviceware, right? Like, so it's really about making it a holistic system. So yeah, you're already making me think, well, like now how can I reach out to those aircraft lines and because maybe they just don't realize that they're doing it. Or maybe they know that that place that they're landing, there isn't a commercial composter. So maybe they're just, I don't know, sadly faking it to make it look like they're doing so. I don't know. Yeah, I actually haven't seen too many. The airlines that I fly on recently are still using plastic and it's terrible. And oftentimes they don't want to fill up my own, water jug and things like that. So yeah, it's behind in the times.
Absolutely. I just flew KLM, which is a Dutch airline,
Mm.
and they are typically the Dutch, as people are much more aware. But you're right, it was totally plastic, and I was obviously noticing how it went, and it was a compostable bag, and in went all the plastic, and I was just like, okay,
Wow.
right, so why do
Wow.
you even have that compostable bag? And that takes me to my next question, which is ultimately there are two things which will always matter: performance and price.
Mhm.
So do you have to deal with that a lot in terms of how much do they hold? That is the performance side. Do they leak? Do they break up on it, like, do they break up as in, do they tear, or compost while they are not supposed to compost? Or, and then of course, vis-a-vis, because price is always in comparison, right? There's no price in
Mhm.
isolation. So vis-a-vis a traditional petroleum polymer, do you have to face a lot of price pressure as well? So address those two, performance and price.
Yes. Performance is super key, and I'll be biased to say that we do use one of the strongest resins out there, which equates to a higher price. And so, yeah, the performance is huge, especially for anyone that's picking up food scraps and in the waste management field. Everyone wants it to be cleaner. And another point that we like to make is using a bin liner in the bigger, larger bins. It's actually really helpful for haulers and custodial staff because it's less bin washing, which saves on water costs. So you kind of have to show the different cost savings that are there. So less bin washing when you use a compostable bin liner, but also some bags out there that are weaker and starch based. We don't use starch based compostable resins, but others do because it's cheaper. Unfortunately, they are easier to tear, and sometimes those bags, they double bag the bins, which just means it ends up being the same cost anyways. So there's a lot of benefits to the rules and regulations out there that say, you have to save on bin washing, or, you have to ensure that you're using compostable bags. It's really interesting because in Metro Vancouver, in our backyard, the haulers are so commercially, the compostable bags and liners are celebrated, but residentially they're not. And so there's kind of this really interesting battle that, I use the term battle wise, nicely. It's not like there's a huge fight or anything, but it's just confusing to people because residents want to use the smaller bags and haulers are encouraged to use them. But there's this incongruency right now with the rules, and it's very confusing for everyone. So long story short, you want to use a good bag. Otherwise you're wasting your time and you're wasting your money, and no one's going to do it if they don't have a bag. I don't want to say no one, because I actually backyard compost and don't use our liners here because we don't have a commercial composter here. So in areas where there is a commercial composter, which we happily, our bags are certified across all of the different composting facilities. It's a new CMA certification, which we're really excited about to share. So yeah, so as long as you have a commercial compost facility and you want people to do it, I would say, certified compostable bags are the way to go, because so many people don't do it just because it's got the yuck factor, right? And it's interesting too, because there's other paper bags out there that are actually PLA lined. And so a lot of municipalities are like, hey, this bag is actually accepted, but compostable bags aren't. And it's actually not the performance of the bags, because people keep saying it's plastic, it's not actually going to decompose. It's the problem is that we don't have labeling guidelines federally. And so I feel like once we get that sorted out, have the right certifications, and then get the infrastructure running, then there won't be all these different problems. But again, it's all about local context. So So yeah, I don't encourage starch-based bags because they do break down faster. But that's the funny thing about compostables, right? Is they're designed to break down. So you have to make sure that the buyers of your products understand that fact, right? Because they see it and they expect it to be just like a normal plastic bag, which is not designed to break down. And so, yeah, again, it's all about education and going back to that again. So,
What is your take on, like, most of the products that you guys seem to be doing are industrially compostable? What is your take on the argument between industrial and home compostable?
yeah, such a good question. I've had people say that they used our bags in their backyard compost and they compost great. And I'm like, that's great. That's good. I still wouldn't encourage anyone to do that because everyone's managing their pile differently. Me starting out, which is hilarious. I just moved into this home like last week, and I finally have access to this backyard compost that I'm going to start fresh. And I caught a dog. My neighboring dog was eating out of the pile. So now I'm already discovering the issues that arise from having a compost pile. Some people also say the liners are great for worm composting. Apparently the worms like to lay their eggs within the material. But again, are people cutting it up into smaller pieces so that it can decompose and be eaten by the microbial activity faster? I don't know. How much waste are they producing, and how many of the bags are they putting in weekly? Because it's a different feedstock, right? And it's very much an art and a science when it comes to composting. So I think home composting is great. I would love to see anyone who has a backyard to try it. And there's so many different ways of doing that. It fills the need for people who don't have a commercial compost facility in their jurisdiction, right? So we often try to tackle working with urban environments because that's typically where there are industrial commercial compost facilities, and that's the best place for our bags to fully reach their end of life. But again, home composting, there's a new certification coming in with BPI in just a couple days from now. And we haven't really got there to discuss if we're going to go with the home compostable route. The best part about these certifications is that we know that there's no PFAS and there's no toxicity. And I care so deeply just about getting getting people to care about the soil. And so, yeah, to think that there's chemicals and things like that, there's already so much of a mess to clean up. So yeah, that's a very roundabout way of saying that. I think home compostability is great, but everyone's probably doing it differently in their backyard, just like how everyone designs their gardens differently. So yeah, it's going to be fun to watch the movement, I hope, grow, and I think it will, and I very much want to be a part of that movement.
What about the other end, the composters end? We see a lot of challenges that they have to face with different compostable bags. Like you said, there is variations in labeling. Many people, consumers may not understand it. And they have a huge challenge also with the speed of degradation. It may not degrade at the same speed as a yard waste or food waste. So how do you look at that challenge and how do you address it as EcoSafe?
Yeah, it's interesting when people, either know me or purchase our bags from somewhere. We do a lot of distribution, right? So you actually can't find our bags typically on the shelf. We are in retail a little bit, but that's not the bulk of our business. So when people do touch and feel our bags, they really enjoy the fact that they open easily, they work really well, they're really strong, they perform great, right? That's awesome. Now they're asking me, well, where can I buy them? And so a lot of people are buying their compostable bags from the dollar store or the grocery store. And I don't think it's mainstream yet to understand what the certifications are. And so, and like I said earlier, there's no labeling guidelines. There's no law that says you can't label this compostable, not in Canada yet. So it's just become a mess in that way because people, yeah, there's greenwashing. People are buying a lot of stuff on Amazon too. And I don't think Amazon quite has that set in their standards yet. So especially being up in BC, it gets cold in the winter. Local context, again, I'm always going to come back to that. So there's different feedstocks at different time of the year. A lot of yard waste right now, which is a great input for the compost. With composters, we always like to start with asking them, are you hitting the standard temperature being 140 degrees Fahrenheit, right? Between one. So we say if you're hitting 140 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit, then our bags will decompose famously well within 2 weeks, even. And so the recent closed loop report that came out about the breakdown of compostables, it actually shows that compostable resins actually compost a lot quicker than fiber. And so I think people see fiber and they assume they base it off that connection with trees and that it should be decomposable, but the resins actually work quite well because it's thinner and they're just designed to be in different environments. So we work with composters. If they're skeptical, we always say, let us send you some samples. And we let them know we do a lot of program work. So a lot of the feedstock that you'll be receiving will be cleaner if you see it in our bags, because often if you're seeing our bags, that shows that we've also done a little bit of training with the end user to show what can and cannot go in the bag. So we do try to make people very aware about contamination. I do a lot of that training on the back end. So I'm basically the trainer of the trainers that are then going out there to sell. And so that is where a lot of communication breakdown happens, because a lot of the people that are selling our products, they're not like me. They don't know everything about the industry, or they want to do good in the world, but they don't know where to find the right information, right? So I'm just kind of a resource for everyone along the way to help, standardize the fact that if we're hitting this standard, and we've got these certifications to prove it, this should perform perfectly fine in your pile. Yeah, when it comes down to the science, like composters to me are kind of like farmers. They have their way of doing it, and we never, ever want to tell them what to do. If they just don't simply want to accept compostable products, that's totally up to them. That's, it's their business. And at the end of the day, they want to produce the best compost possible. Not to say that adding compostables ruins that, because it is a good carbon source, right? Yeah, but it's different in every case. And with the bags specifically, they help get the feedstock from A to B, and that's the most critical part, because a lot of, as you know, 40% of our food is just being wasted and sent to landfill, which is a huge opportunity lost.
Great. Like you mentioned before, there is a lot that goes on the policy side, and you're very clued into that aspect.
Mhm.
So, what are the inconsistencies that you're seeing? And in an ideal world, what would you like that policy framework to evolve as? We talked a little bit about SB 54, and then again, various inconsistencies that are there. You talked a little bit about the compostable bioresins also being treated as plastics, so that's another challenge. So if you
Mhm.
were to give us a little bit of a brief in your understanding that this is what an ideal policy should look like in terms of the compostable packaging, what would that be like?
Yeah, I think it's a message that is often repeated, at least in the circles that I'm in. And first, it needs to start with the standardization of labeling and making it very clear. And I know that can be hard for some, because we want our products to look authentic to our own branding, and I totally get that. But we need to get to a space where people can see a piece of packaging and right away identify what it is, especially for composters too. By the time these messy packaging with food scraps all over it gets to their pile, we also want it to be identifiable to composters too. So I think standardization of labeling, like let's just do that across the board, because right now different states are doing different things, and they're making different decisions, and it's almost like no one's talking together, no one's talking to each other, and it's just, we don't have to recreate the wheel. Like I feel like all the solutions are already there. Like I was looking at Project Drawdown this morning, and like all the climate solutions are already there. So we've got the Sustainable Packaging Coalition that's been doing tons of work behind what's working well and what doesn't work well, and there's guidelines out there that are coming from third party certifiers that are doing good work. So let's just get the labeling clear as day, make it green, put the certifications on there. But in the real world, the infrastructure is still not there. And so it's interesting when you see leaders like California say we want everything to be recyclable and compostable by 2032. But then there's this catch-22 of, oh, we don't have the infrastructure. We want our compost to be organic certified. Compostables were created after the organic certifications were created. So they're not accepted right now. And it's just this like ridiculous loop that as a person that just wants to see it happen, just like, let's just get it over with, but it's just taking longer. So I don't know how to fix that problem other than just keep showing up to the meetings and being an advocate for that. But I think other people you've interviewed too have said the same thing. And yeah, I think we really need funding for composting infrastructure and to get that going so that we can understand that this works. This is where it works, and this is what it needs to look like to work. That's kind of a roundabout answer to that. And I'm
That's
also a
pretty deep.
champion.
Yeah.
I'm a champion of reusables too. Like I was saying, compostables aren't the silver bullet, so we just need to all work together. And I've kind of noticed the reusable industry harp on the compostables before, and it's quiet. It's a little bit quieter now, but I feel like we could all be friends because we work hand in hand. Like, how are you going to collect your food waste if you're not using liners? Are you just going to use bare bins the whole time and wash it out during the wedding party? Like, probably not, right? So yeah, it's again, it's all about context, and we gotta just collaborate, and it's happening, which is exciting.
So you call the reusables your friends. What about the recyclables? Where do you stand there?
Yeah, good point. In BC, I'm really blessed to have a great system here. We really separate everything, even plastic films. And so being to big shows like Waste Expo, and there's a lot of funding that has gone into recycling. And so I believe in it. But I still think that we should be supporting our zero waste refillery stores if we have one, and like refilling jars. The amount of jars that I keep is a little bit insane, but they're so like, let's remember that these materials are reusable and useful. And the problem is right now is plastic is super toxic. So, we gotta use the right, but sometimes I'll just buy a product because it's made out of glass and not plastic, and make those simple choices. So yeah, support your zero waste refillery if you have one, because those stores are great and they're popping up everywhere.
Yeah, my wife bans me because I keep getting kitchen, like, what do you call them? Fruit moths or food moths. So they,
Oh,
like, she says each time you do this, you only want to buy refillable, but my kitchen is steaming after that. So
yeah,
somebody's laid eggs and you can never get them out. So that's
yeah,
the one challenge. I don't know how to overcome that one, but
yeah,
typically it does happen. Even if one egg comes, then you are in trouble for a while.
right. Oh,
So food moths. So those,
I'm gonna
that's
have to
the
look
other one
into
challenge.
that. I haven't
I
had
don't know.
that.
You clearly don't have that, so that's a good thing.
Yeah,
Maybe BC takes care of the eggs from food
yeah.
moths.
Oh, wild. Yeah, never know what we're bringing in.
Awesome. Okay. So if you were to gaze in a crystal ball and see a future for EcoSafe and 5 years down, what would you see? And you can decide how you want to phrase that in terms of, you could say in terms of size, which is a lot of people we talk to are about scale. It could be in terms of impact, but how it would impact. So what would that future look like for you 5 years down for EcoSafe?
Yeah, right now I am focused on really owning in on how we can make composting cool. I want it to be so cool and irresistible that everyone's doing it. And so it would be amazing to have different composting tools out there. So we're right now we're offering tools to make composting second nature. That's our tagline that we believe to be true. And the bags and the bins and the signage and the education that we do that in our network with the different composters and haulers across North America. So how do we bring that to scale? And it's like, okay, like I was saying earlier, if someone has a backyard, they could be doing backyard composting, right? And I'm discovering now that it would actually be better if I cut up the banana peel before putting it in my green bin and then putting it in my backyard compost, right? And so, how can we create just little new tools that make it trendy and cool and easy for people at home to backyard compost? If they're just getting set up in a multi-residential building, for example, we have a whole program for that. That includes a bag dispenser and the bins and the signage and the welcome, letter to all the residents. So how can we really grow that in a way that's not so challenging at first. So a lot of it has to do with marketing and education and communications. So how can we scale that? And then also how can we scale our product offering to encourage people to do it in the backyard? I think there's something there in both ways. I'm very excited about the decentralized composting community that's erupting, especially in the States with the community composters. So I'm always thinking, how can we make the people who are doing the actual work on the ground, how can we make their jobs easier? That's something that I'd like to look into a lot more.
Okay, you answered this partially, but I'm going to have to ask you again. What does good garbage mean to you?
Mm. Good garbage is something where anything that we create and design has multi-purpose and use, and it's actually not garbage at that point. Then it's just a handy resource. But in permaculture, for example, anything that is designed has multiple purposes and uses, which like a spork, it's a fork and a spoon. We don't need all these different materials. We just need one thing that can do multiple uses, and that to me is the definition of good garbage, where garbage doesn't actually exist.
Thank you, Sammy. This has been such a wonderful conversation. So great to have you on the show and the work EcoSafe and you're doing. I wish you nothing but the best, and I hope in the next 5 years, all we see going into those trash cans is compostable bags with compost in it, becoming compost and helping the
Yay.
land. So thank you for the work you're doing and thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, babe.